introduce yourself. Like, why are you here? What do you make? What are you doing? What are your projects?
Yeah, I'm Mike Becker, and I've got Fight Club. It's out there on the floor, and it's working some of the time. Hopefully, when you get to it, it's working.
Very cool. The Fight Club project has been worked on over the years. We've seen it at the show. You brought in all the different phases and things like that. And it's funny, like I described to people watching the process of Fight Club getting built reminded me a lot of actually watching the movie Fight Club. So it's like you see it, it's iterating, and then I think it was last year was the first time I had the full sound and dress and things like that. It was like you're watching the movie and you're like, I don't know, understand what's going on, and then it hits and you realize what's going on. And you're like, well, my God, this is awesome. And so, I mean, I spent time on Fight Club, and the things that I think I was telling you the other day, it's like, it just, you feel something when you're playing it. The way that you've done the sounds, the way they integrate with the interactivity and stuff like that. Like, how much of that was like an idea you wanted to implement versus as you're working your way through it, you tried this. Like, what is your process for basically what's in that game now?
I wasn't expecting that.
Let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched the movie. It's one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie. I've watched it so many times, and so it's like it's all in my head, so I had a good idea of picturing what I wanted to take from the movie, and like taking the concept and the feel of it from that to the pinball. Mm-hmm. But I've been working on it 4 or 5 years. And throughout that time, I take a lot of notes, just like when I'm walking the dog or, just spare time, some on vacation or whatever, I'll bring a notepad. And I have all these notes scribbled on random notebooks everywhere. And as I work on it too, I'm scribbling notes. Half of them I never get back to, but I know they're there. Eventually I'll get back. I'll go through all these and try to implement all these ideas, but they just keep coming along as throughout the process.
Well, I mean, it sounds like the kind of thing where it's like you've got all your notes, you've got a list of things you want to do, but that sounds like the ideas are outpacing the things you're actually knocking off. So the project kind of just keeps going and going and going, But I mean, it's definitely been fun. I mean, like playing the game, like I said, it's inspiring for a lot of people. I think that when you can see, sometimes there's the homebrew projects where the theme is just the name of the theme on it, and you kind of got to get in their head and visualize that. I think that what's been really fun about seeing the game go is that there's a lot to that. That's not a lot of like in theory. There's like a lot of physical world like in that playfield. So I think it's really cool to see. So when you're talking about like all the notes and stuff like that you get and that you make and stuff, is pinball for you like what is pinball for you? Is this a creative outlet? Like, are you using it as a learning tool? Like, what is the time that you spend on pinball? Like, where does that fit in? I guess in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of my free time.
Yeah.
And for me, it's been a fun hobby. Mostly fun. Sometimes they're very frustrating. But yeah, it takes up that kind of a project space for me. I like doing projects. I'm very project orientated. I didn't expect it to take this long.
Right.
I don't think anybody does. But these projects go a long time, most often. And
so do you have like okay, I want to have this done by this point in time, or is this just like a passion project that's just filling up the time until you move on to something else? Like, do you have like any goals of saying I'd like to be finished at any time, or is that not even part of this process?
I always keep saying 1 more year. And I'm saying it now again. But this time I think I'm actually getting close to that. And I really would like to be finished, yes.
So like in the game itself, like is the game, is this the prototype iterative version and you aspire to move that on to a new playfield or final designs? Like what is your workflow from where you are to when you consider it finished?
Yeah, so like Lynn was saying, it's an iterative process.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, I did plan to get to this point and then put it into CAD. It's mostly in CAD, but I plan to then have a new playfield cut and artwork put on it, and then move everything over to that.
Right.
And I've gotten to the point that it's just taken so much of my life. And looking at the bottom, if you've seen the bottom of the playfield, there's a lot of stuff on there, and I just can't face moving that off of there and trying to put it back on something else. So I've kind of abandoned that idea, and this is going to be the final playfield, but I'm going to try to get art on an overlay and put it over the top. So cool. That's my plan.
So you're talking about like the stuff that you're doing in CAD and things like that. I mean, is your workflow like I'm more of like a bend it physically and make it like, real in front of me and then try to translate that into software later on. Again, I built 0 pinball machines. What is your workflow like?
Yeah. And the nice thing about Homebrew Pinball is that there are a lot of different ways you can go with it depending on what type of person you are.
Okay.
You can start with a software approach. I did not. I started with a blank piece of plywood.
Okay.
And I just started putting foam core on it with hot glue. And it holds up amazingly well to pinballs. But the nice thing is that it's really easy to then rip things off, move them, and adjust things, and try and get an idea of what you want to do. So that's kind of where I started with. And as I've gone along from there, I've picked up a lot of things that I didn't know how to do, like 3D modeling became a huge thing. I've got a ton of 3D parts in there, 3D printed parts. Welding, I started to do that. The artwork, I had no idea how to do that. I just downloaded Inkscape and started messing around with that, and I've got an idea how to do that. So I think I can do art with it now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun that way. If you don't know something, either you can get on YouTube or whatever and learn it, or there's a great community here of people.
Yeah.
Everyone on the Fast Slack channel and Pinside, everyone really wants to help everyone else. So you just ask questions, and people are so helpful.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so eventually at some point, one more year, you're done with it. Do you ever aspire to do another game? Or has this been enough?
I feel like that's another thing with Homebrew Pinball. Everyone that does it probably has a million ideas that they want to do after this game, the next game.
Right.
I do too. So yeah, I have a bunch of parts and plans for future games, but hopefully I'll be able to take a little break before I start that. But yeah,
there you go.
I get to that point.
Okay, so like I asked Lynn, so everyone's hard part is different. Like, what is the part about making Homebrew Pinball that like you just despise? You would rather never have to do it yourself? Do you have something like that?
Well, that would be ripping everything off the playfield and moving it to the new one.
So the busy work, the shuffle around.
That kind of thing with the wiring.
Okay.
The wiring takes a huge amount of time. It's really surprising how long it takes. It's kind of like you get into a zen, I guess, with it, but also it is tedious work.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that? MPF updates. I don't want to bash MPF because MPF is awesome. Yeah, I've had some trouble with MPF just because I got left behind my own doing on an old version. So trying to upgrade versions can be a bit of work. But if anyone's starting out, I would recommend starting out and staying current.
Latest and greatest.
Yes.
Well, I'd say too that because I was aware of that stress of needing to get updated, and finding those little bugs and stuff like that you find, knowing that newer versions solved some of those bugs, but then the effort to get there. And I'll give you huge props. I appreciate everything you've been sharing about that experience. So it's like, go in, I hit this wall.
All my complaining.
No, but I mean, the thing is like, it's not complaining because you'll express the frustration, but then dig in and solve it. And I think that's what has been inspiring for a lot of people who've been watching that, because there's others in the same boat as you. The idea of having to go redo your software to have your living project keep going, the idea of having to refactor that kind of stuff is just like, that's the part nobody likes doing. But I think that you've been able to show that like, hey, here's the issues you've had, which I'm sure other people have heard. And then to see that you actually saw it all the way through, that can be inspiring to the other people to just say, I mean, at some point, everybody's just got to get caught up. Because I mean, getting left behind, the support, we're all friends here. The support for the people that are way, way back is eventually going to be just you supporting yourself. So if you do get unstride, get caught up and get moving forward, it'll be a lot better. I think that a lot of the development, whether it's from the firmware side for us or the MPF stuff, has evolved over the years. I mean, you've been around long enough that you've seen iterations of these things go and go and go. So getting up to the mainstream and going forward, like I said, it's been cool that you've been sharing that. I know other people are frustrated, and I think it's inspiring to see that you took on a lot of that stuff with less than 3 weeks before the show. Even my palms were sweating.
I did not intend to. Yeah, I won't sugarcoat that. I've been pretty stressed the last 3 weeks because of that, but it's working now, so I'm stoked.
It's like a reality show deadline. It's like you got to get up to the show, and then you've gotten there and you made it. So
yeah.
I mean, as far as the building and creating of games themselves, I guess I'd say you talked about all the work that had gone into this. The idea of refactoring all that stuff sounds miserable. Are there things you would do differently on your next game should you decide you ever want to do that? Things you've learned that you would say, I'm going to start this so I don't have to deal with this later on.
I think my next one, I'm going to start with a blank piece of wood in the foam core, but then before I start throwing a bunch of mechs on it, I think I'm actually going to go with the CAD first.
Okay.
Because trying to do that after you already have all the holes and everything on your playfield is quite difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've heard that a lot too. It's a lot of us have gone and had to learn new software. It's you need a problem to solve, and I think that you've seen that there would be benefit from starting that way, but sometimes it takes getting where you did to realize that it would be beneficial to do it another way. So again, I think that all this pinball stuff is a ton of work, and that Fight Club game looks freaking awesome, and I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.